Originally, we were going to have an interview at the start of every episode of somebody in the staff. Then we realized that you don't care about somebody random, so we're just going to cut it and pretend like there was one for the awkward transition. Alright, this episode is about theme development, and so let's just talk about our experiences with theme development.
My experience with theme development is it's very interesting because Tate and I developed the theme for this year's book last year together. And it was a lot of really deep thinking and trying to figure out every little detail, which ended up being very helpful for when we got to this year's book. We had all the answers for any questions that needed to be answered. So Tate, what's your theme development experience?
Emmy is using a very sarcastic and funny tone because I have a reputation for going crazy with themes. Last year we had a theme competition to decide this year's theme, and so by the end of the summer of that year, I think I have developed 9 distinctively different themes, all with gigantic Google slide presentations, because I found it entertaining and fun. I was passionate for it, but I learned a lesson of not getting too attached to any theme. The theme we went with this year, I think we made in August.
Really?
Yeah, I made this theme in August.
Wow.
And maybe we'll do an episode once the book arrives about the book, but it's very far from where we started. And so we just have 4 tips about the verbal development of a theme. We have 4 tips about the visual development of a theme. And just before all of that, I just want to make explicitly said that don't get too attached to anything, because whatever you make, it's going to be good. It's just not might be what you imagined in the first place, which is true for every project, really.
It really is. The first tip is to always start with your verbal. It's hard to start with a vision board of a bunch of different colors and vibes and then make some words that fit that. It's easier to start with the words and then make that vision board and work on the visual.
Our advisor Harold was talking to me about how he's going to run the theme competition this year, and he was planning on making every single team make their own mood board of just like a Pinterest board of just different images and different vibes they want to go for. And I told him not to do that because, for one, there's always going to be new designers, and so making very aggressive graphic design packages that are complex, that can put you in a very tough position later on in the year. And plus, if you make the verbal first, it's really easy to make the visual after. It's not the other way around. And so you could say, oh, I want to do a 70s themed book. And you could easily make a mood board for that, but just nailing down that verbal first will make like headline creation later on, stuff like that, much easier. The second tip for verbal is to, whenever you have your verbal all planned out, one exercise you could do is go to last year's book and try to reimagine it with the new theme. That's what we did for this year, is that for the headlines of last year's book, we saw it through a new lens, because there's always topics that are in every year's book, like there's a pep rally or there's a football game. And so if it's not easy to come up with headlines for those type of events that are probably guaranteed to be in next year's book, you should probably focus more on opening your theme's direction out, right?
Yep. The next tip is to start with the opening copy to match the energy you want in the book. So you always want to start with opening copy because it's the first thing that your readers are going to read, supposing that they go in order, which they should. But if they start with the opening copy, you want to make sure that that matches the vibes for everything else that is going to be written in that book. And then your writers can look back at it and take that as inspiration for how they're going to write headlines or subheads or stories, quotes, anything like that.
It serves as something to go back to. Whenever you feel lost in creating the yearbook, just like as a reader, whenever they feel lost, we'll just go to the first page, table of contents, to see where to go. You go back to your opening, visually, verbally, to see what is this book supposed to be throughout. And what your opening should be. It's really easy to say, oh, I want to do something special for the opening. But making it consistent with the design and verbal principles in the rest of the book is really important in the end. The last verbal tip we have is to make an elevator pitch. And what an elevator pitch is that, well, it came from the saying that, let's say you're in an elevator with a very rich businessman, and you're like, all right, I got this idea for a thing, but you're only an elevator and you only have 1 minute to explain your idea. Elevator pitch your theme. So let's go back to the 70s book that we never made a 70s book. That was just the first thing that came to mind. But you say, it's a 70s book about how we flow, and it's called We Groove. That was bad because it was off the top of my head. Emme is covering her mouth laughing right now. But being able to just have a 1-sentence total explanation for what your book is or is going to be is really important, because what happens when some random student who's just saying, oh, wait, you're in Yearbook? Okay, what's the next year's book going to look like? You have to have a 1-sentence explanation, and if you can't figure that out, you're not going to be able to figure out things further along the line.
Yeah. So last year, we were creating a theme. We didn't end up going with this one, but it was a travel poster theme, and it was called Ready to Go. And our elevator pitch for it was Indiana Jones meets a yearbook, and everyone kind of had a picture in their mind and knew exactly what we were talking about the second that we said it, which is really helpful for people who aren't in Yearbook and just kind of want to know what the theme might be. For our first visual tip, you have to make sure that it's something that even new designers can do. As a designer who was new last year, having things that were difficult to do as a thematic element was not very fun. It made me not want to design anything. But as I became a not new designer, and I knew how to do those things, I was kind of always pushing for the new designers to also be doing those things. But it's hard for them, especially when they're first learning just the basics of design and how a yearbook works, to just make sure that it's easy stuff, but not so easy that it looks like it's made in Canva.
This isn't saying that you shouldn't go complex, but the things that you put in your book have to be easy to teach. Easy enough that you can make a Google Doc of instructions on how to apply a certain Photoshop effect or something like that. Just make sure that they at least know the direction they should be heading so they can ask for help. The second visual tip is that people want to see pictures in the yearbook. And so if your theme is prioritizing the visual design aspects over the actual content, people might not like the yearbook as much. As an example, this year's book, the thesis of this year's book was to make the content stand out. And so the visual was really laid back. It was just only rectangles, only 4 colors, and it was super basic. You don't have to go that far. You just have to make sure that your shapes aren't covering important parts of images, and that instead it's enhancing the image. A common example of this is applying a cutout to a photo, so maybe something sticks out of the photo frame. That's a cool design element that emphasizes a certain part of content instead of emphasizing that you can design well.
Yeah. Our next design tip, or visual tip, I should say, is... Oh, you wanted to say that one, actually.
Oh,
yeah.
It's my favorite word.
It
Don't
is.
be niche. 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 Don't be very super specific. You have to think about what the average reader will want. And your average reader is a dumb high school kid who knows nothing about journalism. So you have to... The theme is mostly for yourself. It's for the staff. The theme is so the staff has a direction they go into, and they feel like they can see what the book is going to look like. The average student cares nothing about the theme, except if it's really dumb. So your only job is to make sure that the theme isn't so dumb that when the regular student receives their book on release day, they go, really? An example for this is that just like looking through lookbooks, if you make a Taylor Swift theme, if you have a student that doesn't listen to Taylor Swift, they're not going to like it. If you have a Netflix theme where everything looks like a Netflix show, or a Spotify theme, that one's really popular. Kids who don't watch Netflix might think it's dumb. People who don't listen to Spotify might think it's dumb. And so making sure that your theme's visual is more of a trend than a specific thing that a company does is important.
And not like a trend that's something trendy or popular right now, something that will last for the duration of the book and for forever. An example is, don't do a scrapbook theme. Don't do it. It's very cringy. It's very, like, it just doesn't look good. Don't do it.
Don't make your cover a locker. Please
don't
make
please
your
don't
cover a locker.
Next tip is to test your theme, and that means to just be able to make a page, recreating a page from last year's book with your new theme. It's really difficult. It's more difficult than you would think.
It's so difficult.
It's so hard, but if you can do it, your theme is good. You should also be able to easily figure out what a cover for your book will look like, and also what a t-shirt might look like. A cover is very important. It's the first thing people will see of the yearbook.
Really?
Yeah, it's actually so crazy. Most people see the cover first. The back cover is also important in case they get their book handed to them upside down. But just make sure that your front cover and your back cover are very simple, very easy to figure out, very easy to visualize. Yeah, that's the word. And a t-shirt. Honestly, having a yearbook t-shirt or a yearbook sweatshirt or anything just is something that's so specific to yearbook, because nobody else has yearbook t-shirts because they're not nerds.
I believe the correct term is yeared.
But just making sure that it's something that'll stand out, so that people know that you're in yearbook and you can represent it.
Right. If you're struggling to get a rough draft of what a cover or what a yearbook t-shirt that everybody on staff gets is, then you should make your theme broader and easier to do, because if you can't do it as the creator of the theme, your staff can't do it as the listeners of it. That's all of our tips. That was wonderful.
All right, thank you for listening. If you want to listen to more, you can find us on YouTube at Yearbook Podcast, and make sure to like and subscribe.
Oh, it still sounds so natural.